17-year-old Jerry that's living with hookers and heroin addicts in a $25 a week flop house, right, while he's holding down a full-time job.
How did it all lead to $450 million in revenue that you've generated, 10,000 plus people? And that is better than 99% of entrepreneurs ever.
But I had learned lessons. I had paid attention, and I don't know how to quit, and I don't know how to stop.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. Most entrepreneurs build businesses, a few survive them, and even a smaller group rebuild after losing everything. Today's conversation is about what it actually takes to stay in the game. Jerry Brazie has spent nearly 3 decades in the trenches building, buying, and selling companies across transportation, logistics, real estate, and construction, generating over $450 million in revenue and employing 10,000 plus people. Without investors and without a safety net. He's faced recessions, lawsuits, near collapse moments, even personal health failures, and you've kept building despite all that. Now through the Kronos Group, he's creating what most founders never get, a room of real operators who challenge you, sharpen you, and hold you accountable. I had the pleasure of being on Jerry's podcast previously, and we had a ton of fun talking through things. And Jerry's story is one that I know I found fascinating, which means I think everyone else on this podcast will too. Jerry, thank you so much for being here.
Man, Adam, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I had a great time when you came on, so I think that this ought to be fun.
I will expect that it will. We're going to push each other a bunch. I asked everyone a question to start with, right? Which is, how do you define the podcast is called Entrepreneurial Excellence? How do you define entrepreneurial excellence? Like, what does that actually mean to you?
For me, everything I ever did, I did to better my family. I come from a very, very difficult background. And so every step that I took, it was just a means to climb out of where I was. And so I don't want to say I was selling lemonade at 9 years old or any of those things, right? But I got my first job as an 11-year-old. I paid taxes. I was born in 1969. I paid taxes in 1980. I've never not paid taxes since, and that was a legit job for a restaurant that I didn't have any connection to. Then when I was 12, International House of Pancakes said they'd pay me 50 cents more and let me work both weekend days. And so I moved on to that job. And so for me, it was just continuing to have steps up. I got approached at 28 years old to start a company. Honestly, man, I don't think I knew what the word entrepreneur meant. I bet I didn't at 28 years old. I knew what business owner meant. I was running a company, a transportation company for a lady at the time, all of the operations. I'd grown some kind of people got to know me and I had some sense of what I was doing and what I was about. We were pretty profitable. We did a pretty good job. And so I got offered an opportunity to go start a company with somebody else that was going to finance it. And so I jumped on it. And the reality was, even then, if I knew what I was getting into, I don't think I would have done it. So entrepreneurial for me is just a means to an end, really, to this day. I love business. I love the game of business. I have learned to love it, even as I have had my ups and my downs. I like the competition side of it. I hate the failure, but I love that part of it, right? And
you can't have the success without the failure, right? You got to have both, otherwise.
Dude, I've had some spectacular flame outs. But along the way, my children just graduating from high school would have been an event. But my 3 kids, I've been married for 30 years, which is unimaginable to a 25-year-old Jerry or a 17-year-old Jerry that's living with hookers and heroin addicts in a $25 a week flop house, right, while he's holding down a full-time job. This world that I've crafted for myself is unimaginable. So it's all been a means to an end to make sure that my children and my wife have a life unimagined by me as a child.
So is that, in a sense, and that is what excellence means, that you can have this unimagined lifestyle that you maybe read about in a magazine or saw in the newspaper or something, and you have become excellent enough to provide that new world? Or how do you define it then?
I wouldn't even go that deep because I don't think I had any sense of when I got my job helping this woman grow her company. They were doing about $1.5 million, and I went into her and I said, "Hey, you're paying that dispatcher I'm probably $40,000 a year, and I'm driving for you at I'm 22 years old. How about you let me do that job?" And she's like, "Oh, I can't do that." I said, "No. She's not good at it. I think I can do it. I'll do it for $10 an hour." and you pay me $10 an hour for 6 months. Now, this is a crazy job, 10 hours a day, tickets coming at you left and right. You're communicating, this is pre-computers and all of that, right? So, I mean, obviously there were computers, just not at this place in 1980s. And I did it very, very well. And I went back to her. And the only thing I said to her is, if after 6 months I'm doing the job for you, you pay me what you're paying her. Now, Adam, 40 grand a year to me, I mean, I could tell you how in 1988, how to spend $10 an hour. I knew how to live on that.
Yep.
The idea that I could make $40 or $40,000 a year seemed impossible. And so again, it always comes back to a means to an end. And I don't think I really even had big enough dreams that would say I would own, make this amount of money, or I'd have a ranch in Central Oregon, or multiple houses, or travel the world, or, any of the things that I had. Forget about. And most importantly, a family for 30 years and 3 fantastic kids. So I don't want to ascribe anything to it other than I had an inquisitive mind, and I just a crazy, crazy work ethic, and I was able to drive it somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, do you think then the underlying, if you like boil it all down, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at the end when we get through things too, but almost what you just said, is it just comes down to like that work ethic? Is it just you're willing to work harder than anyone else in those situations?
And this for success, people got to understand, I'm a high school dropout, 16-year-old education, right? But I have a lot of street smarts, and I have a lot of common sense, and I have a second to none work ethic. And so I bought a house when I was 20 years old. I paid a 12% interest, 12.5% interest on an $81,000 house, because I read an article that said I needed to buy a house. I didn't know I had never heard of a mortgage. I had never heard of equity. I didn't know what an interest payment was. I didn't know what any of those things were, but I read this article, and it talked to me about how to make money and how to plan for the future, buy a house. So I went out at 12.5% interest, not having any idea that that was a high number or low number. I mean, in my day, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. That was the going rate, but I didn't have any concept that how these systems worked, but I was interested in them, and I wasn't afraid to ask questions. And so then I went out and learned. But I say that to say my work ethic is crazy. 16, 18-hour days is nothing to me. And I did it for years and years and years. I mean, I had a major competitor go out of business in my 4th year after starting my company. And I went in there and I worked 8 days on a 45-minute nap on the 3rd day. My management group was going home on 18-hour shifts, sleeping for 6 hours and coming back. But we hired 51 people in a month and grew $2.5 million on an annualized basis. I had to take advantage of that opportunity, but it was nothing to me because I stole food as a kid to eat.
Yes.
So whatever sacrifice I got to do, I drug a 10-inch screwdriver out of my back from a mugging behind a bowling alley. I mean, compared to those things, whatever I had to go do didn't matter. But that work ethic taught me everything. Well, excuse me, let me say this again. That work ethic gave me the ability to learn everything that I needed to. Doesn't mean I learned it firsthand and right away and didn't make mistakes. I absolutely did. But I was always thirsty.
Why do you think you had that level of thirst? Like, a lot of people went through what you went through, and we'll have to talk about so many of your stories, but like went through so many of those things, there aren't that many people who went through that who are in the position that you're in today.
That's a complicated question on a couple of fronts, but just directly, I have 8 brothers and sisters, so I'm child number 7. My mother had 6 kids when she was 23 years old, and she brought home the baby, the brand new infant, and at home she had a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5-year-old. 6 children, right? 3 in diapers. My dad gone for weeks at a time and then would come back. It was just insane. And so 7 years later, I was born. And then I have a little brother and a little sister because they didn't want me to be an only child. Again, abject poverty. So in a way, I got to watch my older brothers and sisters, everybody got pregnant as teenagers and everybody went to jail and dealt drugs. And again, violence was everywhere. And, we just had these lives. Nobody went to college. There's no expectations, none of those things because you're poor. And so in a way, I didn't avoid all of that, but I never did drugs. Let me start here. I never smoked because I watched my brother smoke and it led to drinking. And I never drank because I watched them drink and it led to drugs. And so I never did drugs because that led to jail, kind of in that order. And somehow in all of that, I was able to kind of put it together that wasn't for me. And so I avoided all that. I've never done, I've drank, 2 dozen times maybe in my life, but I'm not a drinker. I'm not a smoker. I never did drugs. So I was able to avoid those trappings by watching them and seeing what not to do, getting pregnant as teenagers, all of that. I was just able to avoid that. And so I had that, call it an influence, call it again, that street smarts that said, I can, I doesn't have to go this way. And that played a big part of it because when you are poor, no one wants you to get out. Your family doesn't want you to get out. The community doesn't want to get you out. Your teachers, your counselors, no one around you. There's not a lot of help with if you're born in that and doesn't black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it didn't matter. The neighborhood, we all had one thing in common. We were all poor. And so if you escape that or even think about getting out, they're going to try consciously and subconsciously to pull you back because if you're going to blow up their whole world, if all of a sudden the guy who raised the same way, went through the same stuff, had, none of the same or law, did not get advantaged in any way the same as us, if he can get out, my whole blame victim narrative gets blown up.
Yeah.
And so they will try to pull you back only because if you get out, they can't legitimately and honestly say to themselves, hey, it's some guy back east that screwed me over's fault.
Right.
It's the man's fault for screwing me over. Or my mother didn't love me or my dad was never home or, whatever. I never ascribed to that. I never did. I never saw those boundaries. I wasn't aware that I didn't realize that those boundaries are there. I was just like, man, I got to keep going. I got to just keep pushing.
Are you so close to your family at all, or like not so much?
No, for the most part. I mean, they've worked for me. My parents, they're both still alive and they're fantastic. Again, part of my story, I guess this is why I said your question was complicated. I don't really talk much to my brothers and sisters anymore. We went our separate ways. But when I was 13 years old, my next oldest sister, so that'd have been baby number 6, died on the eve of her 21st birthday, fairly suddenly. And that was in December. And then a few months later, in March or April of the next year, I had just turned 14 and I got a virus and it ate the retina in my right eye and almost ate the retina in my left eye. I had this quick surgery circa 1982, right? Laser surgery. So I'm blind in my right eye and I need a corrective lens in my left eye, legally blind in my left eye. And so I was hit with this out of nowhere. And then 4 months later, and the story I'm going to tell you is really what set the kind of the baseline. This is the foundation of why I think I was able to go on and do the things that I was able to do is I was taking money out of the bank, at a bank, $80 I had in the bank. In those days, you had to leave $5. I don't know if that's still the case, but you had to leave $5. So I'm taking $75 out of the bank. I turn around, 4 guys. I didn't see them. I should have. I'm a street kid. I know the game. They got me pretty good. They roll me. They break 2 ribs. They break my nose. They roll me underneath a bus stop bench, and away they go. This was in August. I was 14 years old. And so I wake up a couple hours later. I roll out from underneath of it. I get on the bus and I have 2 transfers and then I have a 2-mile walk. I make the transfers. I pass out at the second transfer point. I mean, I got blood down my front. My nose is hanging half open. They broke the top half of it. Again, these 2 ribs still bother me to this day. And I get to the point where now I got to walk home and I'm just miserable. And as I'm walking home, Portland, Oregon, I live in Tennessee now, but when I was walking home, I go when I'm in Portland to this square. There was an oversized square in the sidewalk, and it's still there. And right next to it is some duplexes and some quadplexes. And as I stepped on that square, I don't think it was the square in particular, just the timing, but as I stepped on that square, a voice, this is true on my children's eyes, told the story 1,000 times, a voice behind me to my right, a female voice said to me, everything is your fault. And I thought, that somebody was yelling at me out the window of the apartments that are right there. And I look around, but again, I Jiminy Cricket. Was it God talking to me? Was it my conscience? I don't know. Remember, I got blood down my front. My nose is broken. Both eyes are black. I'm miserable, right? I mean, I'm this close to death. I look around. There's nobody there. So I talked back to it and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing's my fault. And I said, everything's your fault. If you don't take responsibility for everything, you're going to end up like everybody else. Now, I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have a counselor. I didn't have a pastor.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. I went home subsequently. I have a little nubbin on my nose. I held my nose shut for 3 days until it just quit popping open, and then the thing healed. But I'd like to say it was a hockey stick, but it wasn't. I didn't change right away. I didn't avoid a lot of the things that I ended up going through, but it stuck with me that everything is your responsibility. Everything is your fault. And so at 28 years old, when I was approached to start a business by outside investors, I was ready for it and kind of brought all that together because I didn't blame anybody else for anything. No matter what happened, it's my fault. And that's been an absolute superpower for me as I built, bought, sold, failed, succeeded at all of the things that I've, a dozen or so companies over the last 30 years and all of that revenue, simply because everything is my fault.
I mean, it's basically saying there is no victim mind. You don't have a victim mindset in any way, and that therefore it gives you no excuse to mess up.
Why would you give the power to somebody else over your life? I mean, a victim, all you're doing is giving away power, and that never made any sense to me. I mean, it didn't make any sense to me when I was younger in particular. I control, maybe that's the stubborn streak in me. I control who I am. I control the outcome. I was always into sports. I'm 6'4". I'm 240 pounds. I'm a big guy. So I love that. Again, I come from a very violent background. So those kind of things kind of lent themselves to each other. But I learned really early on to control myself and to not go crazy, not be over emotional. I tell the entrepreneurs all the time, these shows where they build motorcycles and the dad throws the wrench and walks out and slams the door, in these bake shows and these restaurant shows where everyone's screaming, like, who in the hell would work for these people?
Yeah.
Right? Why would anybody? There's no money in that. There's no, but the general public thinks that's how businessmen operate, right? Because restaurant owners throw the eggs on the floor. And I'm like, no, guys, that's just not how it is. So I learned to control myself very, very early on. Mine control myself was not bringing my boot down after a fight and killing somebody. It happened to me twice. Another voice, not outside my head, not nearly as dramatic, just said, that's enough. Kind of that conscious in me said, that's enough. And I mean, I'm 17 years old, full of rage, just big human being, and just got in a scrap. And now I'm just going to bring my leg down, my foot down. And it just said, I mean, literally my foot in the air said, that's enough. Because the next step, that's different. You're going to go somewhere else, walk away. And so that really taught me, don't let those emotions take over, because bad things are going to happen. I just took that into business.
I mean, okay, so then how did you get started? So you take this into business, you got that first job, you convinced her to give you the dispatch job, and then one thing leads to the next. Like, how did you just kept working harder? And then like, how did it all lead to that 450 million in revenue that you've generated, 10,000 plus people? And that is better than 99% of entrepreneurs ever pull off.
Yeah, I got approached by an outside company. I'm 28 years old. It's a second epiphany in my life. I'm 28 years old. I got approached by this outside company. I had helped this lady running a messenger courier company from $1.5 million to $5 million. We had about 100 employees. We were doing really well. I ran it for her from 23, in the story I told you, until I got approached at 28. I had trained some people in the city and in Seattle and Portland, and so I had some kind of a reputation. And I got something in the mail in my office. I remember sitting here. My son was just born, my first child. This was a big deal because when my son was born, it changed my entire life. It changed my entire outlook. I quit living for myself and I started living for somebody else. And somebody who comes from where I come from, it's very easy to be very selfish. And so when my son was born, I mean, it opened up. It was an atom bomb in my brain that said, I got to go do things that I can't even begin to understand. And so I'm sitting at that desk. I pull out this pro forma. I didn't know what I was looking at. I knew how to run operations. I knew how to run these companies and do all that, but I didn't know the P&L side of it. I didn't know what a pro forma was, right? I didn't have any information. So I sat there right there, and it was the second big epiphany in my life. The first one I told you, not nearly as dramatic as that first one, simply sitting at that desk, and it said, shut up and listen. If you don't shut up and listen, you're going to be doing the same thing when you're 50 that you're doing right now. Now, everybody working for me was 30, 40, 50 years old, older than me. I'm this hot thing and I'm running this big company and I'm making all kinds of money that I thought at the time, and things were going really well. But that, again, I listened to that, shut up and listen. And so right then I got rid of everybody I had grown up with. And I kind of looked at my life. My son was born again. And most of my life was playing sports, watching sports, eating while watching sports, while playing sports, and arguing about sports and work that I grew up with. And so I got rid of them all, and I started looking after for people that I had nothing in common with. First one was an architect on a basketball team, just because he had an education, and I had to start to understand things. And then I met attorneys and accountants, and I had to shut up and listen. I could not have heard that advice at 22, 23. I heard it at 28 after my son was born, because I'm looking for a hack. And so I took that pro forma. I understood now what it meant, and off I went. And I took their offer, and I was the front-facing part. They were the financing part to start this new transportation company. I did $4 million my first year. I was the sales and the operations, and they came in and fired me on my anniversary of the first year.
You mean to cut you out of paying you?
There's this little thing called cash flow.
Yeah.
It's important. when you're growing a company. I learned all about cash flow in that event. I didn't know that much about it. And I had overrun the coverage for the amount of money that they had. I had grown too fast. I told them what I was going to do. They didn't believe me. They didn't have the amount of cash that they claimed to finance that kind of growth that quickly. And they ran out of cash. And so they came in and they fired me on my anniversary. But I had learned lessons. I had paid attention, and I don't know how to quit, and I don't know how to stop. And so 17 days later, got together with my 6 largest customers, 4 banks and 2 title companies. I sat down with them meeting after meeting, all on the same day, and told them, I just moved you from one company to another one. They're firing me. I need to go start another one, and I need y'all to come with me. And they're like, Jerry, we just moved. And I know, but I do a good job. I have a reputation. Y'all trust me. Let me do it for you. Okay. All right. I said, no, I'm not done. I need you to prepay me. I don't have any money. I got this company. They prepaid me for 10 years till I finally said that. I mean, we just realized they were prepaying me. It was about $250,000 a month, and they prepaid me. And I used that money to get the company started. I didn't know, just like the mortgage, I didn't know that you don't go ask customers to prepay you.
You just didn't have a choice.
Well, I didn't have a choice, right? No, all I can do is say no. I have a little bit of cash, though, in the context of I had a reputation and I had a history with them and I did a good job and they trusted me and I communicated and, I didn't ever run from them. And so that was really valuable. So they essentially, my 6 customers financed that original company. So we opened our doors doing, $2.5 million odd a year. We ended up doing $4 million the first year, $8 million the second year. 12 million the third year, 14 million the fourth year. This is $7, $8, $10 average ticket prices. And I just went crazy. And then
this is in the 80s.
First one, 98. And then I started my own in 99.
But I mean, the amount of revenue you're doing at that time that's a lot of money. I mean, there's a lot of money even today to build a business like that.
I didn't have any idea, Adam, that was a lot of money, meaning I didn't know the average company was $400,000, $500,000 a year in the United States, right? I didn't probably less then. I think that's what it is now. I didn't know that. I thought everybody did $4 million and then $8 million. I had no context.
So it's growing like a weed. How did you deal with the fact, like, all this revenue's coming in? How did you first, a few things. Like, first off, you're getting all this money right up front. A lot of entrepreneurs would start spending that and run out of cash, right? They would overspend and not understand what their books look like, how much cash they need to have at the end of the year. How did you make sure you didn't make that mistake, number one? And then number two, was it just growing so fast you basically were not sleeping? Did it go to your head in any way? That like, hey, I'm CEO of this company, I'm running this whole thing, I'm making a lot of money now, theoretically.
It did not. Oh, no. Yeah, it didn't. It went to my head eventually, but it was years later. The critical part for me was in the year 2, I was just completing $8 million in my second year. And I had got written up in the business journal because, again, I had some reputation here about the things that I was doing. And so that got the attention of a retired Fortune 500 CEO who came out to meet me, cold called me, came in, and he was starting a mastermind group, what they call now a peer-to-peer group. But, in those days, they called it a mastermind group. And he sat down and he said, I'm putting this group together. It's 8 to 10 entrepreneurs. I want you to be a part of it. You're growing quick. You're new in business. I was 30 years old. And I said, that's great, but I'm working 18-hour days. I got 2 kids at home. I'm going to have a third one coming pretty soon. I don't have the time. He said, you can't afford not to. You got to afford the time. And I said, well, how much is it? He said, $600 a month. I was like, did you not hear the 18-hour days? I'm not making any money. I'm growing faster than I know what to do with. He said, yeah, you can't afford not to. You need to be part of this group. And so I sat down in that group. And by the time I really started to talk 2 years later, because I just shut up. I mean, I took shut up and listen to an art form. I listened. I tried to clear my thoughts because people were telling me things I didn't understand. And men in particular, and probably ones with chips on their shoulders like I had, we don't want to be told what to do, right? We only want to talk about the things that we know about. And then bullshit our way through the other things that we don't know about. And I didn't. I had no humility about it whatsoever, or total humility, I should say. I was just like, just feed me. And so by the time I got to year 4, I'm doing 14 million. Those guys were instrumental in helping me cut it back to 8 million because I wasn't making any money. I did not realize I was really good at sales, but sales are easy. There's nothing to sales. Selling profitably, that's a whole nother program.
You're giving away your product, then everyone's going to buy it.
That's right. So that's easy. What's hard is profitable. And so I cut it back to 8 million. I cut it in 2 months. I took it from 14 million annualized basis to an $8 million annualized basis in 2 months. I got rid of Staples and McKesson, two giant customers. Each one of them were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month with me, but they had to go.
You tried to tell them, you're like, hey, like we need to raise your price to this amount, and they just said they're not going to stick around, or you just said didn't even try.
Staples was 92% of all of my workers' comp claims. Right. So just on the face of it by itself, it was just unaffordable. And the way the things were going and I was growing so fast, I'd love to tell you I had enough information to have made that decision.
Yep.
But it was more like I got $8 million. My group asked me, what do you need to do? I said, well, at 8 million, I know everything. I can see every movement and I know where everything's going. It gets bigger than $8 million. I can't control it anymore. Right. I can't see all of the pieces. And so I said, and I'm running out of time. I had a partner that had joined me that I brought him in from the other company, and he was doing all of the finances. He jumped to my competitor at the same time, tried to get that competitor to buy me by not going after any of my AR. I had $1.4 million in AR, and he hadn't paid any bills in 2 months.
So he screwed you on purpose.
Yeah, correct. He tried to set me up for failure. That was 2003. Well, he didn't know who he was dealing with. And I brought my sisters, I brought my parents, I brought everybody I could find. We started making phone calls. I saw right away I had the 1.4 million. We started collecting the money. We started working with our vendors, right? You can't always pay them, but don't ever lie to them. Yeah. Don't say, I got a check coming. Say, this is what I can do. And I can't pay you at all, but I can pay you this. And when you say you can pay this, make sure you can pay it, because you only get one chance at that. And I learned all of those lessons very early on, how to do all those things. It's invaluable that I was able to learn and to negotiate my way through that, particularly while I'm growing, right? Again, this company just continues to grow.
Same.
And so I went through all of that, and ultimately—
Did you crush that competitor? Sorry, did you crush that?
Oh, he went out of business. He went bankrupt a decade ago. Yeah.
So you're laughing to the bank to some extent while that guy who tried to screw you is gone.
That's right. That's right. We competed with him for a while, but nothing serious. And then ultimately we got to the other side of it. I cut it. So I had to get on top of it now. So I just cut $8 million, took it back down to $8 million, could get my hands around it, and then regrew it from there back up to $14 million again. And ultimately, at one point between multiple companies, I was doing $25 million a year, give or take.
Wow. Okay. So then you're doing all the revenue. What happens to the company? You sell it? Like what, you exit?
No, I still own the transportation company. I still own today. COVID almost killed it. I got in a fight with the government over independent contractors that almost killed it. But it's still a nice little business, and figuring out what to do with it. I exited the business, brought in a manager, and then I'm kind of on the outside looking in, trying to figure out what to do with it, to be honest with you. I got a lot of opportunity to regrow it again, but I live in Tennessee and it's in Oregon, but it's still there, still going 1999.
Wow. So it's it obviously pays a little bit here and there. You're making some money on it now. Like what? So talk to me a little bit about it going to your head, right? So you're getting all this success. You're like, I'm the big man, big company, big revenue. Portland's a city, but it's not that big of a city, right? And like you're probably a big man on campus to some extent at that point.
Yeah. It was, you learn these lessons, and sometimes they gotta be taught to you multiple times. And that's why I say it probably my most valuable aspect, particularly to other entrepreneurs, is what I've done wrong, even more so than what I've done right, because that's where I learned all the lessons. I'll tell you, probably my most expensive lesson. I'm sitting in my group. This is 2012 or so, and I'm in my peer-to-peer group, and I got approached by another company. A competitor was doing about $4.5 million a year, to come and to buy them. And I thought, okay, this is good, $4.5 million a year. I think we were doing about $15 million a year at that point. I said, okay, I'll do that. I was making, all companies combined, I was doing about $25 million a year, and I was making $250,000 a month. And I thought, okay, I'm really doing well for myself now. And this is where I got over my skis, because my group told me, these peer-to-peer groups, and that's what the Kronos group is. I'm finally starting my own. I'm the CEO now, coming in and saying, hey guys, let's do it. Because you go with your group half a day, everybody gets a half an hour to talk about their business. And then after that, throughout the month, you get an hour to spend with me to really go through whatever it is that we need to, hold you accountable for or plan for or whatever it is. So I'm sitting in that group. I took them the deal. Here's the deal. That's my half an hour. Everybody kind of hears what I'm thinking. And over 2 months, they told me, don't do it. It's too complex. At $4.5 million, but you can't, it's broken up. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Making a long story short, I thought, Adam, they didn't understand that I was doing $250,000 a month in profit. But why would they doubt me? Why would they? What are they?
Because you knew what you were doing. You were smarter than everybody.
Everything I touch makes money. I own gas stations and car washes and convenience stores and this transportation company. I'm building houses and I'm doing subdivisions and I mean, I don't know what you guys are talking about. So that cost me $6 million on the face of it. I only bought the company for $1.5 million. Ended up costing me $6 million over 6 years. And at audit afterwards, not only did it cost me $6 million, but I was making that quarter million. I should have been making 310. So I was leaving 60,000. I mean, but it's a quarter million. I was leaving $60,000 over 4 or 5 years while I was looking over trying to fix this other thing. So let's call it 10 million for round numbers that I cost myself buying that business that my group told me not to, that I didn't listen to.
So why? So it's, I mean, one, okay, fine. You didn't listen. You thought you were gold. Makes sense. But then, like, what went wrong with the acquisition? Like, why was it too complex? Why did it, and how do you get those numbers exact? Where it's like, hey, I could have made 60K more. Was it just like, had you not distracted yourself with buying this other company, you would have improved the core company itself or done a million other things to make it better?
I say all the time that, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to put me into any operating company. I won't find you 3 to 5 points of margin. Just, I don't care how well you're operating. It's almost impossible inside of a business to be able to see that, for us entrepreneurs to start something from scratch and it's 1, it's 5, it's $10 million. It's just impossible. And so having somebody from the outside help you look at that, you're going to see things that you just don't see. I don't care how hard you're trying. And I operated as lean as you could possibly until I really started to make serious money. And that's when I got rid of those guys that helped me kind of see that leanness. And so as we were auditing, or helped me keep the thing lean, as we were auditing, trying to figure out why this thing won't make money and where are they mispriced and what do we have to go back after? Meanwhile, their employees are quitting left and right because they don't want to be independent contractors, and then they're stealing business. And how do I put a stop to that? We're starting to audit our own business, and we're like, wait, what do you mean I was paying that over here when I could have been? What? How's that even possible? Right? So then we add all of them on top of it. But if I took that off, so through that process, long drawn out, the world would have been so much easier with AI in those days. Yeah, if we had that. It just, again, the average ticket price by this point is $10.
It's crazy.
Right? You're talking $20 million in revenue. It's just very, very difficult. And then I came and sat it right on top of it. They were employee-based. We were independent contractor-based. It never mixed at all. That was a big, big problem because half their people quit. Now I can't do the work. I got to deal with the customers. I got warehouses full of stuff that's not moving. Everybody's working 24 hours a day. It was not a good fit. My group was 100% correct. And I would say I probably never recovered from it on the transportation side, actually, because by the time I got through that in 2018, we started to really make money again. And then COVID hit and just took the legs out from under it.
Yeah. What are some, I mean, if you think through like entrepreneurial lessons that you took from that, like one is it, don't believe you're that smart. Number one. Two, make sure you have a group of people you can talk to. But what else? Like you hired a huge number of people for those companies. How did you manage like hiring people, firing them, dealing with all the, did you build a leadership team around you? How did you deal with all of that? And then how did you deal with, once again, all the success? You're in Portland. You must have had these family members calling you up, be like, hey, Jerry, like, help me out. I need a little bit of money here. I need a little money there. Jerry, you're rich. You can help me, right? And you probably getting calls like that. How do you drown out? I mean, how do you drown out that noise? How did you stay focused? How did you build a team around you, if you ever did? And now you know how to do it, of course, but like maybe it took a long time. What did you do? What are the entrepreneurial lessons?
Process of elimination, for sure. It can be so difficult to do some of those things that if you think about it, you'll never do it. But you just got to start every day and you just got to make incremental changes. But for me, the thing that was very, very difficult for me was stepping aside and hiring people who were competent. Right? That was hard for me to do. And I had to learn that competency lesson and probably learned it the hard way, meaning let somebody who's doing the hiring, let them actually do the hiring. Let the accounting people do the accounting, right? Not have to be a part of every single part of it. Because when you're an entrepreneur, the thing they tell you is you need to work on your business, not in your business. Well, that's true, but that's not true until you've matured. Right? When you're starting out, you are in, on, around, up, down, sideways in that business. And so those those habits that serve you so well when you start to scale can start to work against you. And so being cognizant that scale is working against you, and that what you want to do as you scale is not going to work, and you got to let other people get in there. That's a big part of it. And I was doing it through multiple different companies also, not just, like I said, I just detailed all of the different companies I had. I started to learn to hand things off and then let people do it and then let them work between themselves to try to figure it out. And so we would come in, I would actually have my operations meetings. My peer-to-peer group was every month. It was the first Monday of the month in the morning. And I would have my operations meeting on Monday at night, because those peer-to-peer groups were so good that I would come back with something actionable. This is why I like peer-to-peer over a mastermind where, there's 200 people on the call and somebody inspires you to go make sales or how to improve your accounting. This is on the ground. I mean, I literally talk to them about this problem. I'm having trouble finding salespeople. What do I do? How do I hold them accountable? And I really use that group, to your point, to help me with my HR. Okay, what do? You have 200 employees. What do you do over here? Okay, you've got a sales way better than mine. What do you do? And really copy it. Just have them come in, and that's the value of the group. We were really good with technology, and so we were paperless. We were paperless in the early 2000s, right? And so I grabbed onto that across the entire company. So they would be coming in, and they would start. I would have companies come in and walk through the business and see how we do a dispatch. We had a silent dispatch. I'm dispatching hundreds, thousands of orders every day. No human connection, no conversations, because I recognized that humans conversating was not very efficient.
A lot of things are not human in most of the work world. But let's go back to the hiring really quick on hiring. Go back to that. Right. You mentioned sort of like you got good at hiring and delegating, and then you also got good at hiring competent people. So like break those two up for me a little bit more, right? So talk about hiring. Like well, let's talk about competent people first. How did you identify competent people, and like how did you recognize you were okay with competent people? So kind of what you said, maybe, and I might be wrong about this, but like what you hinted at is, as sort of this probably cocky leader, you didn't necessarily want those competent people around you, because those competent people will tell you no sometimes, and they'll be right. And that means you have to listen to them. So am I reading into that correctly, or?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And so I looked for, in all of the people that I've hired and had work for me, particularly at those levels, I looked for competency, though, because I wasn't afraid of changing things. I always say, change today what you changed yesterday. Don't be scared to do it, and don't be scared to change tomorrow what you changed today. The group would spend a month working on a program, ship it out, and it just didn't work. And I'd say, well, it doesn't work. So what can we learn from it and go back? But everybody wants to fight and get emotional. That wasn't me. So I don't know that I was had an issue necessarily with competence. I had an issue with incompetence. But what level? You know what I mean? Somebody's incompetence is another person's competency. And so my level was so high that I had trouble understanding that people aren't always going to work like I do, but they can still be very, very effective. So I looked for street smarts and common sense. That was my number one thing. And if they showed some aptitude for it and the ability to communicate with those two things, I've always said street smarts and common sense are absolutely magical. If you take an education and you pile an education on top of those two assets, that's somebody formidable. But somebody educated without those other things, not quite so much. And so I really kind of lasered in on common sense and just the ability to think, and then tried to get out of the way and let the managers do it. If I could go back and do it again, I would do it much better than I did the last time, simply because even though I tried not to be a part of it, I was still too much a part of it. So now I'm very much removed in running the companies that I do now, and it's a completely different situation. But I've learned.
Okay, before we get too far deep down this other path, like how do you identify? Like, what do you use? What are your heuristics to identify like street smart and common sense? Right, like everyone thinks they know what those things are. I think most people probably don't. So how do you identify being street smart and common sense? Or
Coming from where I do, coming from my background, I was able to read people really, really easily and figure out real quick. And it's something as simple as, do they look you in the eye? I mean, particularly today, that's not nearly as prevalent as it used to be. But are they able to communicate, right? Do they look like they have some humility to them? So meaning, if they're too eager, if they're too anxious, if they're too over the top, that's probably them hiding something. Street people who come back from where I come from, are really honest, right? They're really straightforward. And so if they're quick to say, I don't understand this, that's good for me, right? I like that. Perfect. No, it's okay not to understand that. But if you're going to try to BS me about it, and really it came down to just, I don't want to say feeling, but I was never able, I did all of the, all of the testing for this just job fit, this personality trait. And I did all of that and I failed at that and I succeeded at that in some cases, but I never could really zero it down other than some nice long conversations. I mean, my interviews would go for somebody I was serious about to go hour, 2 hours. Yeah. And really have conversations with them where they did most of the talking, and I did most of the listening so I could get a sense of what they were. One of my best employees ever ended up running my office and was a VP in my company for years. I hired her straight out of jail, 60 days clean off of meth. Wow. And she worked for me for years and years and years, and ended up becoming a VP in one of my companies. And she was just extraordinary. But I saw in her exactly the things that we just went through, and they really popped. And she wasn't even aware of what her capabilities were. And I was able to augment that and help bring that out in her because I saw it in her.
Like lucky for her, but also amazing that you were able to see that. Do you think there's a difference between entrepreneurs who come from is there a class difference in entrepreneurs? Like it's not, or people you hired at least, like, would you say like the best people you hired were like this woman who was basically straight out of jail, but had clearly a chip on her shoulder and there's some special talent versus
I would
somebody
say,
who handed them some extent?
yeah, I would say that employers, in my experience, rely too much on what their education is or where they come from or what they've done. I couldn't tell you where any of my people went to college or how their grades were, right? I never really did that. That isn't to say I did 100%. I've had some terrible hires that blew up in my face. I also am willing to risk on people, right? Because I come from that background. And so your point about the family, I've had nephews that I fired 3 times. How stupid is that, right? I've had nieces that worked in my accounting department that's her mom and her put a scam together and stole gas from me at my gas station.
Really?
Changing Excel files, right? I mean, any way you could figure out how to do it. I've had people make a mistake that cost me 6 figures. So I have this because again, I'm from them, right? And so I struggle with the Kronos group. I struggle with, why does anybody want to talk to me? Why would anybody want to talk to me, right? Well, because you have all of this experience, you've done all these things. I know, but no one wants to talk to you. Before I come on this podcast with you, I'm like, what the hell does Adam want to talk to me for, right? I have this imposter syndrome
Which
almost.
I think a lot of the best founders always do. There's like some chip that you're like, I need to prove this every single day. You also should work harder.
Yes.
By the way, you're fascinating, which is why I want to talk to you.
Legit imposter syndrome on my part, and I really struggle with it. And so, that kept me humble at the same time. So maybe because I'm willing to put the work out for people who are willing to help themselves, I'm also real quick though to cut somebody that won't help themselves. But I'm telling you, some of the best people I got have zero education or people from the streets, tough backgrounds, poor people that got opportunities. They went on to live a world that they couldn't imagine. And they're still working for me 25 years later, simply because, they hung with me and through good times and bad. And so, yeah, that personality trait, I can teach people almost anything. If you have the aptitude to learn, man, that's valuable.
I totally agree. And so, I mean, part of it, you're talking a little bit about entitlement too, right? So people who are entitled, I find, tend not to be as good workers or teammates, things like that. One, you agree, sounds like you agree with that. Two, then how does that lead into a world we live in today where it's very global, right? Where you can find people all over the world. We're both American. I've hired lots of people all over the world. I sometimes find in many cases that the overseas teammates that we hire are hungrier and have greater perspective than a lot of the Americans that we hire. And that I really struggle with because I want to hire Americans, but I want to make sure my company's great and we deliver the best product to our customers every day, which means hiring the best people globally. And in many cases, that is, and we have a global team. And so I talk to people and they're struggling because the internet went out or there's a typhoon and their road got washed away. And I'm like sitting here and, I got electricity. I never have issues. My internet stays on. It's sort of gilded castle in America. How do you deal with that with your teams today in kind of a global basis? And I don't know if you have advice for sort of American workers versus overseas workers.
I think that's so, we do not talk about this nearly enough. And I tell I have a bunch of young guys that I work with, a bunch of nephews that I work with that work with me or working on their own things. And I tell them all the time, in the world today, in America, you just got to be ordinary to be extraordinary. I mean, at this point, I'll take people who show up every day, right? I mean, that's the baseline in America today. My perspective is a superpower. And this is one of the things that I sell to entrepreneurs. It's a superpower, my perspective. And my perspective comes from I know what it's like to steal food, to eat as a child. I know what absolute zero is. I pulled, like I said, a 10-inch screwdriver out of my back after being mugged behind a bowling alley when I was 19 years old. Went and laid in a bathtub in this crappy little apartment. Took me 6 hours on a Friday night, Saturday morning to pull it out of my back. I know what bottom looks like. And then wrapped a towel around it, went to work at this carpet warehouse I was working at on Monday morning, right? So what can you go through that's worse than that? But I never want to go back to that. And so I'm driven, and my expectation, my work ethic, is much like most people my generation, right? That Gen X generation. We were left alone. We didn't have anything. We were pre-internet, right? If you wanted to make a phone call, you had to go put a dime in the first phone you could find hanging on a pole 2 miles away, that sort of thing. And so coming at it,
My dad and grandpa are the same way, by the way. They were both very much that same generation. I mean, different generations, but like same mindset. It's just like work really hard. And working harder means you somehow get luckier than everyone else.
yeah, I mean, a perfect example. I have a nephew. He won't mind me telling this story. He came into the room. I have this thing I call the room where I call them my sons, nephew, whoever they are. And you're going to get it. Let's have a real conversation. And so he said, I want to get into this business. And I reached out and I sent personal letters. I was like, how many? Because it's been months. He said, I sent 12 personal letters. And Adam, he was all proud of that he didn't just answer. I was like, 12 letters. What I don't even know what that means, 12 letters. What are you talking about? I don't get it. He said, yeah, 12 letters. And I was like, no, man, you got to go to every one of those places and knock on the door and walk in. And he looked at me, 29 years old, like I had a hole in my head. I was like, y'all don't understand how to get ahead. You got to go knock on doors. Yeah. Jump ahead a month and a half, 2 months. He just got hired at the biggest HVAC company in Nashville. He can't imagine that he got in there. To your point about lucky, he walked in the door. He went to 11 or 12 different places. A lot of places wanted to hire him and said, I can't believe you walked in here. He walks into the biggest one. The security guard happens to be there. The security guard says, yeah, the guy's right here. Let me see if he's available. That guy had 10 minutes before a meeting on a Friday afternoon to sit down with him, took him out back to introduce him to the guy that he might be working for if he got a job. And those two guys got him an interview. They had 20,000 applications last year. 20,000. So my guy says to him, how many people have walked in the door out of that 20,000? He's like, you're the only one.
Yep.
He got hired. He starts next Monday, right? Now it's at the bottom, but and he'll work his way up. So he got lucky.
Yeah.
Right. But how did he get lucky? Got lucky because he got hammered the first 9 places, the 10th place, right? He gets in. He just happened to time it perfectly to get in there. But had he not gone in, he would have never got the job. That is what it takes, I think, in America today. And that is what I think our friends overseas do a whole lot better because they're simply hungrier. Americans lack perspective of how good we really have it. We're drug-addled and, life is so difficult, but nobody knows how difficult life really is until you go somewhere else and see how they live. And then you're like,
life in America is pretty easy for frankly everybody overall. And I know that probably sounds, precious from coming from you and me sitting here in our home offices with our computers and stuff, but life is good for every American by and large.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I just never, I never forget that. I don't. And I try to teach that to everybody that I can, that it's the person that goes out and puts forth the effort. The internet, texting, it started with texting when people stopped making phone calls 10, 12 years ago, right? That really is where I see it starting because it's so much easier to text. I'm like, yeah, but how much more powerful is a phone call? Well, I don't need to call my friend Mike. I said, I don't know, but if you don't call your friend Mike, how are you going to sales call the guy that you met on the train, right? How are you going to do that? If you don't have the reps, you can't use it. And so having conversations face to face with people, interacting with people, those lessons are never going away. I mean, you can automate a business all you want, but at the end of the day, somebody's still got to talk to somebody. And that's going to be the superpower because nobody talks to anybody anymore. And I mean, talk, not text.
No. Look, I agree. I tell people more and more, especially in the AI world, I'm trying to interact with people directly more and more in person.
Yes.
because of that, because who knows what's going to be left. And that we'll get to AI at some point a little bit, but going back to the culture stuff actually, or kind of working in entitlement, given you've had all the success and given where you came from, how do you make sure your kids don't become those entitled?
Yeah, that's really good. So my kids live a life, unimaginable to me, and I spoil them more than I would have liked to. But the thing about kids I've been married now, coming up on 29 years here in August, and I have 3 kids that are all in their 20s. 2 are in the military, and I have 2 sons in the military. Or excuse me, I have 2 sons in the military, a daughter in the middle. And I couldn't be more fortunate with my kids. They turned out very, very well. So they were spoiled, yes, but I expected them to perform. I sent them to Chinese immersion school. So they started when they were 3 years old and they went until the 5th grade. So they read, write, and speak Chinese fluently. And then at the end of the 5th grade, they go to a boarding school in China for 2 weeks. Well, I took the whole family and we dropped the kids off. We dropped the kid off, right? And the other 2 then would spend 2 weeks in China. We'd go back and pick the kid up. A lot of the parents would stay at the school, go pick the kid up at night and bring him to their hotel. And they just did that for the whole 2 weeks. And I'd kick them out of the bus and say, here's a coat, good luck,
Yeah.
right? Go do your thing. And so a combination of, they had to play sports, they had, or something. They had to be involved in things. They had to go do things. And then for me, it was quality time. So I never worried about quantity. That never made sense to me, quality. And so when they got my time, it was all my time. It was all theirs, right? Wasn't taking phone calls and I wasn't doing anything. It wasn't 4 hours a night, but it was 80% of their time going to bed at 8:30 at night. I'd come in and wrestle. I'd come home from work and wrestle with them. I'd ask them, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they'd say, and if you ask them right now, they'll tell you whatever I want. How are you going to get there? I'm going to work hard and be smart every night. And so those little things, weekends would go to the pools. And again, I made sure I'd coach T-ball and then I'd go back to work. They'd go to bed and I'd go back to work. So
That's my life right now. So I do the same thing. I work from home, but I put him to bed and I go
yeah,
back to work.
yeah, I think the parents indulge their children way too much. I have nephews and nieces that are way overindulged, and I have ones that have done very, very well for themselves. And so I think that today parents think that, particularly because people have kids later, you think the children need more time than they need, and kids don't need more time. And particularly what's real time, us watching a football game while we yell at our kid not to make so much noise. I'm talking real time. And so, and I didn't want them to grow up and be worthless, right? I didn't want them to be helpless. So if I get them up every time they wreck their bike and I go running over there and pick them up, what the hell's the good's that going to do for them?
Yeah.
I was pretty ruthless like that.
Yeah. That's great. It sounds like you did all the right things. And if they need jobs, let me know. I'll hire them. They sound like, it's not like they're helping the military, which is great. But they seem like great people. Going back to the culture part, right? You're talking about the culture you built and how you've now gotten out of things in a big way, right? You've kind of changed your perspective. You're not, it sounds like I'm putting words in your mouth, but basically a micromanager with a lot of things back in the day. Not that case anymore. You've really removed yourself from a lot of the day-to-day in different ways. You're doing the stuff that's really critical to you. One, walk through why you ended up doing that. Two, because there's a lot of founders who would say, look, I need to be deep in it. Because if I leave it, the culture is going to get lost. The company won't be successful. Clearly you have some magic sauce you sprinkle on your companies. It can turn into cash, right? You do turn things into gold. It sounds like.
Yeah.
If you step away, does that disappear?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that question is I wish it was like what you said. It was more, it just happened upon me because I got in a fight with the government and then COVID hit and it destroyed most of my business. Literally 2018, 19, and 20, coming into 2020, and then COVID hit and the whole thing crashed. And so it was kind of forced on me, right? Because the businesses were cut down to $3-4 million a year. I have a development I'm still working on now. That's, $38-40 million sellout, but it's being worked on. I've got this new Kronos group that I'm working on. So everything got smaller. And so when everything got smaller, and I'm battling for no money. I didn't get paid for years during COVID and all of that, trying to keep everything afloat and just battling. It kind of became a necessity. I also had to move out of Oregon. Portland became crazy for me. I was born there. I was raised there for 50 years, but It became something I didn't recognize. And so the lawlessness was just, and still continues to be, the homeless is so terrible. And I just saw a world that I didn't understand anymore, that I didn't recognize. And so I found, after taking those beatings and having all of these things happen to me, that I needed to get out. So I moved south of Nashville. Best move I ever did, at the worst time possible. But if I hadn't gotten out, I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal to want to fight my way out of it, maybe just fold the whole thing up. But coming down here gave me a breath of air. And so now I've almost kind of rebuilt it. So I'd love to say I just transferred it over, right? But a bunch of it was taken out from underneath me, and I had to rebuild with what I had left. And so a combination of that and moving down here precipitated me getting people and releasing it more to run on its own. So I'd love it to be more what you said. It was something completely different.
Have you found that the company is better without you being as deeply involved? Or like, if you're giving advice to other people, what would you say? Like, you should be deeply involved as a founder, or you should find a way to sort of remove yourself from everything that's not your core competency or that you do best?
I mean, it's all about numbers, I think. Again, I've had all different sorts of businesses, so that have started from zero and have grown to lots. And I've done hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in real estate, as an example. The reality is that each business is different, but if you have an operating company and it's doing $1 million a year, if somebody's telling you you should be working on your business, not in it, that's stupid, right? If 4 or 5 million dollars, you want to start looking for people to really start to take over for you. But I've not seen, and I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs that started from scratch. I know this inside and out. This is largely people on the ground starting the operating business. And the reality is that you just have to be a part of the business. I think the internet telling people to find people to work in your business while you work on it is ridiculous, because no one cares like you do. And when the payroll is due and the money's not there on Friday night, you're the one that's up at 2:30, not your employees. They just don't look at it. They're not going to find the options. Oh, I can call Mike and Mike will pay me earlier. They just won't find those things the way that you will. They don't care. I'm going to call that guy in the middle of the night. Is he driving the way that he's supposed to? Are we manufacturing this the correct way? No one will do that. And that's what it takes to find those changes. And then just knowing when to start to add people in between you and them, and then still not turning it over. But for me, I would run everything 5, 6, 7 million bucks. I'm not looking for somebody to replace me below that.
But how do you pull it off? Because I think there's a lot of people who would say, by being so deeply involved in those pieces, in some cases, like especially in things maybe that aren't your core thing, you're hurting your ability to grow the business, because there's certain things only you can do. Or once again, for you just work harder, you just don't sleep. So
$450 million over 28 years at an average price of $10 a ticket. You tell me about growth, right?
it's hard to argue that. It's hard to argue.
Yeah, I don't mean that to be flippant. I'm working on back to my imposter syndrome, Adam. I'm working on. I have this experience. I've done these things, right? I don't need to acquiesce to somebody else's feelings about how this should done. That's great. You grew your lawn mowing business to $1.5 million a year, but now you think you need to scale, so you need to step away from it. Typically, I go, well, that's interesting. I know that's what people think. It's not what I would do. I don't do that anymore. I'm working on this. I'm working on saying, what are you, crazy? Dude, you go mow lawns during the day. You make sales calls during the day. You go meet with people during the day. You do everything you can during the day. And then when it's 3, 4, 5 million and it's making good profit, you have to decide, are you going to take that money away from it, $60,000, $70,000 a year, whatever it is, and pay it to someone else? And then what's your return on that $60,000, $70,000 a year? Too many entrepreneurs do things because the internet told them, or the book they read told them, rather than figuring out, is there a return on that? What's your return got to be on a $75,000 employee, right? You're trying to make 10%. Okay. Well, you got to go get yourself a $750,000 contract at a 10% profit margin to pay for that person.
Yep.
So you need a million and a half of new business to hire a $75,000 employee. They don't look at it like that. So it's not quite as cut and dry at that level. I'm talking 1, 5, 10, $15 million. And then,
so when do you decide when to, like, if I take your argument sort of to a logical end, I would say, like, you can just, a lot of founders would say, well, I should never hire anybody because I can do it all myself. So how do you decide when to hire people and in what roles to put them in? Because at some point you still have to decide, I'm going to delegate something away.
yeah, it's 5, 6, 7, 8 million bucks. That's where I say again, I'm not going to dispatch in a transportation business. I'm not going to hammer a nail in a house build, right? I'm not going to pour gasoline. I'm not going to work behind a convenience store. I'm not going to wash a car at the car wash. I'm not doing any of those jobs. But and then I have a layer of people that manage those people, and then I'm actively managing those people. But I know how to do all of those jobs. All right, I know how to do that.
The thing is, like, you know how to do each job, and you can call BS on when they're not doing their job right.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and
Right.
how do you like to set up your reporting structure? How do you make sure you're getting enough information once again without overwhelming yourself too? Because like once again, there's certain things like that you can do right. Only you can be on this podcast. And during this podcast, you can't be looking at whatever reports are coming in right now. So like, how do you make sure other people are doing the right things for the times you need to sleep or do the things that only you can do?
We can always do it better, but reporting, it's in the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. That's critical. And so you're constantly evaluating yourself against financials and against the numbers and how does it stack up? And sometimes we did that better and sometimes we did that worse. It's absolutely true, but it's easy to say, and in practice, it's harder to do. And so you got to be really disciplined. And again, when I was doing, $250,000 a month in profit, I was leaving 60 on the table. Clearly, I wasn't disciplined at that point, and that stuff starts to slip. And so you got to really, really lean into the numbers tell the story, regardless of what our emotions make us feel. Like I said, you spend a month putting something together and it doesn't work. The numbers aren't going to lie. It just didn't work. Put it back. We made more money doing it the other way. Maybe there's a different way to do it that we can learn why it didn't work, but we can't be emotional about it because it's just not. I know this greatest thing ever. The numbers aren't there.
And so is that what you tell the team? Like, hey, just report the numbers, how you're doing. And I don't really care how you do it day to day. Like, don't break any laws beyond that. Don't care. Just show me numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Essentially, that's it, right? Again, I'm always available.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have a conversation all of the time. So
when people call you though for stuff, I find people, I say the same thing to my team and very rarely do they give me a call and ask it something done.
yeah, sometimes more, sometimes less. If there's something big going on, but less and less. As the time goes by, the trust gets built, the systems put in place, the revenue starts to grow again. Maybe if there's big spurts of revenue, again, if we were to add a $2 million customer, I'm going to be involved in that for months, right? Putting that together, making sure it gets done, communicating with everybody, making sure Paul and Peter are talking to each other, all of those things. But I'm not, on the ground doing the work. You're just facilitating it and making sure it gets done. I guess my point is, yes, you need to bring those people in and start to think about those people, but I just don't agree with a startup that's hiring people so that they can work on the business, thinking that they're supposed to do that rather than me working in the business at $3 million or $5 million. I think that's madness. I would never do that.
Look, I mean, the quintessential entrepreneur, forget his politics for a second, right? But Elon Musk, right? There's no doubt he gets really deep in the business and understands every part of it very deeply. But once he does, he gets out of the way and lets his team do his job most of the time. And it clearly works incredibly well. So look, you work with hundreds of entrepreneurs, right? And we definitely want to talk more about Chronos Group too, but you've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs. What are key lessons you've seen across all of them? Like what have made the ones who've been really successful, let's call it quote unquote successful, which maybe defines success, but like what have made them successful and what have made the other ones fail? And then like how much like is luck play into it? Or once again, you work harder, you make your own luck. What is the right thing there?
100%. I'll answer your question. 100% luck plays a part in it, but we make our luck, right? The people on the outside that are jealous of the cars that you have or the things that whatever you're doing, they don't understand what luck is. Luck plays that part, but like my nephew, as I explained, right, he made his own luck. And what I see from entrepreneurs is successful ones is they all work hard. Yeah. Varied backgrounds, educated, no education, dirt poor, inherited it, no matter what it is, they all work insanely hard. And that really, for me, seems to be the big differentiator. Also, though, for entrepreneurs, having worked with as many as I have, the funny thing about entrepreneurs is that we all think that we're the only ones that have certain issues, but we're not going to tell anybody because we don't want to look stupid because clearly nobody else has these problems, when in reality, all entrepreneurs have the same problems.
Right. That's the point of the show. It's because I think everyone's sort of the same.
That's right. That's right. So everybody has the same problem. We just think we're too stupid. Adam's doing it right. He doesn't have this problem. I'm not going to say anything because then I'm going to look dumb. But the reality is Adam's over there saying, man, I know everybody else has this, but I'm not going to say anything because I'm too stupid because Bill Jerry's over there doing it right. And the reality is everybody has the same problems. And so I would say on the high side, work ethic. I mean, that's just it. Work ethic. I mean, sure, if you have some expertise, but I know a lot of people. I know a buddy of mine that inherited a company from his dad. They used to fly airplanes and take pictures, topography pictures, right, for developments and things of that nature. Well, little thing called Google came along and wiped his whole business out. Literally, we saw it coming. He was in my group. We saw it coming from miles away, and he pivoted to printing because he had a bunch of equipment that he used to print out his pictures and do all the mapping and all the things that he did. So he pivoted to printing. Now he's got one of the largest printers in Oregon. Print shops in Oregon, right? So again, yeah, he inherited the company from his dad. It had been around since the late 50s, but that company's long gone. He's just gone crazy growing this thing, and he had every problem growing it. He had every bank issue doing it. He had all those same growth issues that everybody else did. He couldn't hire. He couldn't find salespeople. They'd steal customers. Everything was exactly the same. And this guy came out of privilege, and homeboy just sat in the middle of it and would come into the group every month and talk about, man, I'm getting my ass kicked. What do I do, guys, about X? And I don't have the experience that y'all have because y'all have gone through it. I inherited the business. It was a mature business when I got it, but now I'm growing this, and I'm talking growing from $2-3 million a year to $20-25 million a year. Now he's 80. He's going to sell out of the thing. But I mean, that's real work. And he just had a work ethic that was insane.
What do you think is an interesting question for you? That my EA was, so I have an EA and I'm an exec coach. My EA was telling me recently, she's like, your calendar is one of the top 3 most insane calendars of any person I've ever worked with. She's a great EA, works with lots of different really good CEOs. She's like, your calendar is more insane. You're in the top 3 most insane ever. Your email inbox also in the top 3 that I've ever had. Just like the number of emails, things that come in, all these other things. And then I told my executive coach this, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I should be proud of this fact or embarrassed about it, because he's also all about trying to get me out of the weeds in some cases and some things and doing all this stuff. And I'm kind of curious of your take, because I'm working harder. And basically what she said, I asked her, what did she mean? She said, hey, Adam, you are working. Most CEOs that I work with have 30 to 50% of their day just blocked for like thinking time, other stuff, whatever it is. And I'm like, I don't even know what that world looks like. Like, I'm on calls all day long, except when I'm taking my kids to school. And then we have dinner time at night, and that's it. Like, my calendar's booked. And so I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, or all these other people she's worked with, or all these other entrepreneurs who seem like they got a good business just making money hand over fist. And I don't, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I don't leave my office except to take my kids to school. Like, that's it.
I think that it is like social media. Social media, I think 85% of the business advice on social media is wrong. I think it comes from people who've watched videos, read books. Maybe they got a business degree, but no experience, no concept of how the real world works. But they find a Lamborghini, they take a picture in front of it, and they're spitting out information. I think that is reality. And so for me, my experience has never been one where I was never able to get my day down to where it was so segmented. These guys that, from 8 to 10, I do this, and from 10 to noon, I do this. And I've never gotten there. I've tried it before. I haven't had any success. I missed something. Something jumps over me that I didn't catch. So yeah, that's nothing I ever really chased because I just couldn't make it happen. So I'm like you. I don't believe that's reality. I think that there are, maybe not everybody tells the truth. Not everybody's as honest with it as you are, because I've never seen that either in my own life or the myriad of people. I mean, this struggle for entrepreneurs, I always say, if somebody's trying to tell me that they can make a ton of money working a 4-hour work week, I promise you they're selling me something. They're going to try to sell me something, right? Because there's no way that's possible in the environments that I've been in entrepreneurially, that is even something that you can even begin to think about. Are there unicorns, just like in your business, right? Of course there are in San Francisco, all kind of unicorns, right? But just nail it and run with it. But the rest of us, dude, it's just one day at a time.
Yeah. And just one day at a time, you keep building your business, growing it, and every year. Where do people fail, right? You were talking about all these people, great work ethic. You've seen a few hundred different entrepreneurs you've been friends with, worked with, talked to. Not all of them succeeded, even if they have a good work ethic, or even if maybe they don't, maybe they lose that work ethic. Like, where have they failed? Like, what are the pitfalls that we can all avoid from their lessons?
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice I wish I would have had when I started is that beware of the government. The government is I've been at war with the government for 30 years. Look, I'm gonna lump two things together, government and the legal system. And had I had some context that my biggest problem being successful is shyster lawyers
Yeah.
coming in and that, you know, they would take 12 grand for suing me for $1 million just to get the 12 grand. And then once you have one of those, you got 20 of them, and the employee or the ex-employee realizes he can get a third of that. They don't want 1 million, they want 12,000. And I probably paid hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably millions of dollars in $15,000 nuisance because it cost me $3,000 to answer the lawsuit.
Yeah, you gotta watch out. It's basically just bullies. Like when it comes to employment stuff like that, it's like you take a stand and just say we aren't paying, and
Correct.
word gets around.
Right, and then the government is not your friend, and I'm jaded 100%, but my advice to people, it's not better, it's 1,000 times worse and more difficult to conduct business today, particularly in depending on what state you're in, it gets even more difficult and more restrictive than it was even 15, 20 years ago, and so, where I see people go south more today than ever is just in their not educated enough on what the government will do to work against you. I'll give you a very simple example. This is a true story. It's not specific to what would cause a business to go down, but it gives you context for the government. In Portland, we have a very bad homeless problem, and I owned a square block of right across from downtown Portland, big warehouse sitting there, office, all of that. And I had a thing for my employees and my customers, put a big tent out and did a barbecue in the summertime and would have everybody come by and get a free hamburger. And my mother was cooking them and all that sort of thing. And for years, I battled burn barrels that would light my building on fire from the homeless behind the building. And we would call fire, fire, fire. Nobody ever show up. 45 minutes into cooking, barbecuing hamburgers, the safety marshal shows up and she's telling me about how I can't do this and I can't do that. And ultimately, it's like, I'm not selling them, I'm giving them away. And it's my employee and my customers. And okay, and I'm, hey, while you're here, I guarantee you there's a 55-gallon drum on fire behind my building right now. Can you go deal with it? Nope. And off they went. And so having a better idea of how these governments work, I think would or being more leery of them, would serve people a whole lot more than probably it does, because that's where I see people, get in trouble. You think that you're gonna get in trouble for doing things, just because you do something wrong, and that's not reality, it's an interpretation, and, I'm in development, and there are municipalities, you live in one of them, I live in one of or I have them in Portland, that do not want any building, and building is just damn near impossible. Then you come down here south, and I hear stories of they get permits in weeks and not years. Yeah, because it's years in my part of the world, and that's the government actively working against you.
The building is insane. The building stuff is insane. It's literally hurting everybody in California in that situation. What do you do with? How are you handling? How do you avoid the government though? Like, how does a business avoid it or reduce your exposure? Let's say.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you're either gonna have, like, employees or you're not gonna have employees, and so if you wanna make real money, you gotta have employees, and there's just no two ways around that, and so just understanding what can come at you. We all think that the world is, if I do wrong, I'm going to get in trouble for doing wrong, so don't do wrong, but that's not reality. That's not reality. There are so many interpretations of what wrong is today, right? There's a reason why the attorney lobbies spend the kind of money at the state, local, and federal levels that they do, because they have all of the power. And so when you understand that, working with employees as an example, don't go into it naively. Go into it with your eyes wide open. If you're looking at making a deal on a piece of real estate, don't go into it naively. It's not what you need to fix on the real estate that's going to be your biggest impediment. It's going to be the government. I'm doing a 38 lot subdivision in Portland right now. 31% of my cost on a finished $950,000 home is regulation.
That's insane.
31%. right? So you have the same problem where you are. I mean, you're talking 40 grand for the permit to build a house that cost me 450 grand to build. Is the permit for it is $40,000, right? And so when you start understanding that 30% of your build cost, finished cost, both for the development and the house finished on a $950,000 house sitting there, 30% of it is regulation. It's either regulation because you missed a building season, regulation because it didn't get approved. I have a development that's signed off on. It went into the municipality. It gone through 3 reviews. They come back and they say, we want to see drone footage of where you're going to move your equipment to do the development. I said, that, no problem. And I was just here in June. It's now August. Just show me the regulation for that. I didn't know I needed to do that. Man, it's not a regulation. We want it. I said, well, how does that work? And they said, well, you not do it. Then we take your file and we'll just put it right down here. And now it's August. So you're going to miss your build season. And the carry's 20 grand a month. Right? That's how it works. I have 1,000 stories for me and other people just like that. So when I say the government, it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. Just understanding that, don't look at the deal on the face of it, I'm going to remod that house. Look at the deal on the face of it of my biggest impediment to doing that house is going to be the government.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe there's a different question then. Why do those sorts of deals in the first place? Why not put your extra cash into the market or something like that and just say, I don't need the headache?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I've been asked that all of the time, and I get approached, and I used to do my own investments, and I had an investment outfit, and I get approached about that all the time. And I said, no, I can make more money with my own money than you can make money for me in the market. And I still believe that, but I don't know that I'll ever have another company that'll have 300-400 employees. I don't think I'll do that again. So I think that I would be limited to be how much money I can make, using people around me, using automation, and then just for my own self, what can I generate for myself? And I'd probably keep it under 50. The rules change really significantly over 50. So I don't know that I would start to get anywhere near that again. So to your point,
we're close to that point at Shore, and it's something I think about a lot. What keeps you going after 30 years, Jerry? Like what keeps you continuing biting this stuff off, working as hard as you do? It doesn't sound to me like you've really slowed yourself down. You've taken yourself maybe out of Oregon, so it's a different pace, but what keeps you going still?
I'm never going to retire. I love the game, right? I just started this new Kronos group because I love business. I love talking about business. I love every part of business. And so for me, I love the competition of it. The failure sucks, but I love that part of it too, right? The lessons, the stories. And as I'm 57, I'm in the best shape of my life at 57. And that's really, I lost 100 pounds 4 years ago. Again, I got a 40% block in my left ventricle. I was laying in a hospital dead in 2021 here in Williamson County, Tennessee. I was down 3.8 pints of blood. I had just gotten off of an airplane walking across airports. I was having 100 mini heart attacks a day. And I walked into a hospital. 27 minutes later, they admitted me, and I was in there for 3 days. And I'm laying there, and I'm 308 pounds, and I'm down almost 4 pints of blood, and I'm seeing the end at 52 years old. And I was like, I'm not going out like this. I was 51, November 21st of 21. I said, I'm not going out like this. I'm not doing it. And so I'm going to fight, and I'm going to get my life back, and I'm just going to go till the end. And so I lost 100 pounds in 8.5 months. Like I said, I've never been healthier in my life at 57. I just keep getting healthier, and I keep pushing myself. And so I never see myself retiring. I never really imagined that before anyway. And so I have the heart of a 35-year-old, mentally, physically, emotionally. I've been married forever, and I couldn't be happier that way. My kids are fantastic. I'm a little worried about my sons. They're in the Army with all the crap going on, right? So you got real world concerns there. So I got to have something to keep my brain busy. I love working with entrepreneurs. I mean, I absolutely, every part of this game I enjoy. So, I think that I'm one of those guys that'll just die at his desk. I'll die on a job site type of a thing. I just don't see myself slowing down. It keeps me young, keeps me sharp. And I see too many people retire, that are dead a year later, or 5 years later.
It's their whole purpose.
Yeah. I've been fighting my whole life. I just enjoy the grind, man. That's as crazy as that is. I just do it.
Good entrepreneurs do enjoy the grind, right? Elon Musk does not need to keep working. He clearly enjoys it and building new things. And I hope we are all lucky enough to have that level of drive and things we're interested in. Speaking of the Kronos Group briefly, I think you say on your website, right? You talk about no one should do it alone. How does that work in the sense of doing it alone as an entrepreneur? Do most of the companies you work with, do they have co-founders and partners, or is it more doing it alone? Just you need a group of people you can talk to? Because I've had 4 companies. 3 of them have had a co-founder. My current one, Chore, I don't have a co-founder. I'm the sole CEO founder. And it's different. I like it in a lot of ways, but I think I wouldn't have been good doing this in my first time around. Third time, fourth time is better I can do it better without having a co-founder probably. But how do you think through co-founders, not co-founders, partners, all that stuff?
Yeah. So two questions there, but I'll answer the partner one. Again, I'll just use a simple, you're going to start a restaurant. Anybody start a restaurant's nuts, but I'll just use that one as an example. You're going to start a restaurant. And the reality is they get together with your buddy. You both are into sports. You're going to open a bar. You got good bar food, pizza, all of that. You put it together, right? And then there's the two of you. And it's always great. And I have seen this in my own life, and I have seen this a dozen other times play out. There are successful ones, but everything goes great until money gets made. So when there's no money being made, right, life is good. But then you start making money, and then all of a sudden you realize that you were leaning. There's always usually one partner that's stronger than the other one. This was the case with me. And then I realized I could have done all of those things without the partner. And I gave up half of my company, even though I was the one driving it, I was the one behind it, but I was leaning on this other person as I was going to go do this thing that I didn't understand, that's very difficult, that's risky, that required sacrifice, and having somebody to commiserate with, because as entrepreneurs, we don't have that. Having somebody to commiserate through it just made sense. But then you get on the other side and you start making money, and then you're like, man, that dude doesn't work as much as I do, and that dude doesn't, and I cover this, and he doesn't have the pressure, and he went to his kid's game. And the reality is that I think most people are capable of so much more than they are. And in your case, as an example, somebody that's as a new entrepreneur, find a mentor, find a group like mine, like the Kronos group, right? There's lots of groups like this, guys that will help you directly. And that can help you navigate that world that you're really not too sure. It's a lot cheaper to pay me and come into one of my groups than it is to have a partner and give away half of the equity. And that's been my experience partner wise generally.
Yeah. Fantastic point. You maybe have already answered this a million different times, but the question I sort of always answer on or end on is, if there's a single piece of advice you could give to every entrepreneur to be excellent, what would that be? What does that look like for you?
Be excellent. It's just a work ethic because, but this is true for life. Again, I've said this 3 or 4 times, but I'm super proud of this. The fact that I'm married all of these years and I'm happy, and the fact that I have these 3 kids, it takes a lot of work, man. And it's work that I'm happy to do and a sacrifice that I'm willing to do. And I brought the same approach to my actual job. And I brought the same approach to my wife and my kids, which is to say that I have failed spectacularly with them and I have succeeded spectacularly with them. And the same is true in the business. And so I don't want to break it down to business because it's much more complex than that, those relationships, but that same approach. And the other thing too, man, my kids were born at 28 years. When I was 28 years old, my first son was born. And I've said this before, I had to go out and I mean, I turned into a caveman. I'm talking about, I didn't want my wife to work. I wanted my children to have a better life than I did. And I would leave the house willingly and go out and hunt down that pterodactyl and hit it over the head, regardless of what would happen to me, my personal safety, however healthy I might come out of it, maybe a broke arm, drag that thing back, watch my children eat and go to sleep knowing that I get to get up in the morning and go do it again. None of this self-help BS, I need to work on myself and I need my own time and all of this nonsense that so many people, men in particular, seem to just be inundated with. Yeah. It's like, just go be who you are, act like a human being. Don't beat up on anybody, right? But be aggressive, be who you are, understand what your role is in this. And, this thing I hear all the time about, I come home and nobody appreciates me and nobody loves me and they all just want me for my wall. And it's like, it's just, that's the essence of who you are. And when you spend time worrying about these things, it's taken away from what you're capable of doing, right? We have a certain mentality, a certain behavior. If you can leave that cave and meet up with a bunch of other cavemen that already know how to knock the pterodactyl over the head and drag it back, you're all the much better. And so that's the successful ones are guys who have that mentality, that it's just come in every day, find a pterodactyl, drag it back, get some buddies to help you do it, i.e. via the Kronos group, right? That sort of thing that maybe all you can do is hit a deer over the head, but you need a pterodactyl. They're going to teach you how to do it and go out and you do it together and you drag it back back. And that is the essence, I think, of what being an entrepreneur is, being a father is, being a husband is. For me, anyway, that's really what drives me. It's really that just right there on the ground, caveman mentality to make sure that my children and my wife have a better life than I do. And that's all that I care about, or that I did, I should say. And that's all that I care about, regardless of what happens to me, because life is hard. Life sucks. But the value that comes from all of the things that I've had happen to me, man, they're either as a child or as an adult. I can sit here and cry to you about losing $18 million in real estate because the government effed me over what Uber does every single day using independent contractors. Cost me $18 million, right? Did you hear me cry about that during our entire conversation?
No.
You won't find me complaining about that anywhere on the internet. I do these things all of the time because it just requires us to lick our wounds and go back out the next morning and continue to fight every single day. And the ones that do that, the ones that understand that, then that's the magic. I think that's where you're going to find the successful ones. And that's the ones that I look for.
Get up, do it again the next day, keep going, do not stop, do not be scared, just work hard and make it happen. Okay, one, I need to know, do you have that 9-inch nail that you pulled out of your back? Did you keep it?
It was a 10-inch screwdriver, one of those long, thin ones, right? And the gangbangers that I got in a fight with, actually these Laotians, when I was that age, they had all come over from the killing fields in Cambodia and Laos. And they were living in Portland, Oregon, and they got me. I took some money off them in a pool game, and they got me behind the pool hall and stabbed me. And that's a really great story. Real quick, he comes in behind me, and one's in front of me, and he goes to put it in me, but he's going for my kidney, right? And because he wants to kill me. And because I was blind in my right eye 4 years earlier, I would have turned to the right because I'm right-handed, but I turned to the left. And so when I turned to the left, rather than get me like this, he got me like this. It went in the side, and it came out here, and it got stuck in the muscle. Well, so I got out of that. I got in my car, this Datsun B210 with 550,000 miles and exhaust belching into it. And I ultimately got home, figured out I had a screwdriver in my back, and it took me about 6 hours. I wasn't bleeding profusely, so I knew I wasn't going to die. And I know I'd seen people get murdered, more than my fair share, suicides. And so I wasn't going to call the cops. I didn't need to. I knew what that meant. I didn't know what happened to those two guys necessarily, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I just pulled the screwdriver out, put a towel around me, wrapped it with duct tape, and went to work on Monday morning.
But you didn't keep the screwdriver.
No, it's long gone. Yeah, I'm not sentimental that way, though.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like you were to frame that, be like, I'm going to keep working and keep going. And Jerry, how can people find you, Kronos Group, learn more? What can they do to find that extra help that they might need?
I appreciate that, Adam. The KronosGroup.org, Kronos. Kronos was the god of time. I figure for entrepreneurs, what a perfect name from that perspective. So the KronosGroup.org. They just go there. Everything is there. So you can get a hold of me there. Jerry Brazie, just search my name. You'll find me all over the internet. And you can get a hold of me, Instagram, wherever it is.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much. I know that what I'm going to say will not matter to you, but you do not need to have that imposter syndrome. You're a rock star, and we all can learn so much from you. So thank you for being on.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Adam.